The gambling halls of Station Nexus 7 reeked of synthetic alcohol and desperation. Neon lights flickered across alien faces as credits changed hands faster than starship fuel burned through hyperspace. In the darkest corner of the establishment, where even the station security drones rarely ventured, a high-stakes game was reaching its climax. Zara's violet skin glistened with nervous sweat as she watched the final cards being dealt. The Cathari female's elongated ears twitched with each movement of the dealer's appendages. She had been the property of crime lord Vex Theron for 3 cycles now, ever since her family's debt had consumed everything they owned. Tonight, she was the prize in a game between some of the galaxy's most dangerous beings. Around the circular table sat creatures that would make most sentients flee in terror. Vex himself was a towering saurian with scales that seemed to absorb light, his predatory eyes never leaving the cards. To his left crouched Morg the Butcher, a 4-armed Zephyrian whose reputation for violence preceded him across 12 systems. The insectoid hive queen Zalteth clicked her mandibles rhythmically, her compound eyes reflecting the table's holographic displays. But it was the human who drew the most curious stares. Marcus Chen sat with an almost supernatural calm, his brown eyes studying each opponent with the patience of a hunter. The other players had initially dismissed him as easy prey. Humans were barely a century into galactic society, their species considered primitive by most standards. They were known for their emotional volatility and apparent lack of natural advantages. No enhanced strength like the Saurians, no multiple limbs like the Zephyrians, no collective intelligence like the hive minds. Yet somehow this unremarkable human had managed to accumulate enough credits to buy his way into a game where the stakes could purchase entire colonies. Zara had been watching Marcus throughout the evening, fascinated despite herself. While the other players postured and threatened, making elaborate displays of dominance, the human simply observed. He seemed to see patterns where others saw chaos, finding weaknesses in behavior that even the most sophisticated alien psychologies missed. The final hand was dealt. Vex Theron's lipless mouth curved into what passed for a smile among his species. His cards were strong, stronger than anything he had held all evening. The Cathari female would remain his property, and he would have gained significant face by defeating opponents who had underestimated him. The crime lord's reputation depended on such victories. Morg's 4 arms flexed as he examined his hand. The Zephyrian had killed entire crews for lesser slights than losing face in front of rivals. His breathing had become more rapid, a sign that combat pheromones were beginning to flood his system. Win or lose, blood might be spilled before the night ended. Queen Zalteth's antennae quivered as she processed probability matrices through her enhanced neural networks. The hive mind had run countless simulations, calculating odds with mathematical precision that individual minds could never match. Her confidence radiated through subtle chemical signals that her species used for communication. Marcus simply picked up his cards and glanced at them once. His expression never changed. The betting began with astronomical sums. Vex pushed forward a credit chip worth more than most beings would see in 10 lifetimes. Morg matched it with visible reluctance, his primary arms trembling slightly with suppressed aggression. The Hive Queen added her stake with mechanical precision, treating the game like any other resource optimization problem. When the betting reached Marcus, silence fell across their section of the gambling hall. The human sat motionless for several heartbeats, then reached into his jacket. Instead of credit chips, he produced a small, unremarkable data pad. "What is this primitive offering?" Vex hissed, his translator struggling with the Saurian's disdain. Marcus activated the pad, displaying a holographic readout that made all 3 aliens lean forward in surprise. The data showed mining rights to an asteroid field in the outer rim, but not just any field. These were the coordinates to the legendary Prometheus cache, a lost human expedition that had discovered the largest concentration of rare Earth elements ever recorded. "Impossible," Queen Zalteth chittered. "That location has been sought by every major corporation for decades. Humans lack the technology to find something we lost in the first place," Marcus interrupted gently. "My grandfather was the navigator on that expedition. His personal logs contained information that never made it into official records. The value of such a claim was beyond calculation." Rare earth elements were the foundation of all advanced technology: faster-than-light drives, artificial gravity generators, consciousness transfer matrices. Control of the Prometheus cache would shift the balance of power across multiple star systems. Vex's scales rippled with barely contained excitement. "You would risk such wealth on a single hand of cards?" Marcus met the crime lord's gaze steadily. "The question is whether you're willing to risk her for it." The Saurian's laugh was like grinding metal. "One Cathari slave against the greatest treasure in known space? Human, your species' reputation for poor judgment is well earned." The cards were revealed. Morg's hand was strong but not exceptional. Queen Zalteth's mathematical precision had served her well, giving her odds-beating combination. Vex Theron's cards were magnificent, a perfect fusion that occurred once in thousands of deals. The crime lord was already reaching for both the credits and Zara's chain when Marcus quietly laid down his hand. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus had achieved something that mathematical analysis said was virtually impossible. His cards formed a pattern that gambling theorists called the Void, a combination so rare that some believed it to be mythical. The odds against it were so astronomical that advanced civilizations used it as a metaphor for impossibility itself. Queen Zalteth's compound eyes seemed to dim as her neural networks struggled to process what they were seeing. Her calculations had accounted for every known variable, but this outcome fell outside the boundaries of statistical possibility. Morg's breathing had stopped entirely. The Zephyrian's warrior culture prepared him for many forms of defeat, but this transcended anything in his experience. To lose to impossible odds felt like confronting forces beyond mortal understanding. Vex Theron stared at the cards for long moments, his predatory intelligence warring with disbelief. "Cheating," he finally hissed. "No being achieves the void through legitimate play." Marcus reached slowly into his jacket again, causing Morg to tense for combat. But the human only retrieved another data pad, this one displaying the complete sensor logs from the table's anti-fraud systems. Every scan showed normal results. No hidden devices, no manipulated cards, no quantum probability alterations. "Sometimes," Marcus said quietly, "the universe surprises everyone." The crime lord's rage was building toward violence when the human did something unexpected. Instead of claiming victory with the arrogance that most beings would display, Marcus looked directly at Zara for the first time that evening. "The choice is yours," he told her in fluent Cathari, causing her ears to twitch in surprise. "I won't simply transfer ownership from one person to another. If you choose to leave with me, it will be because you want to, not because of some debt or legal obligation." Zara felt something crack open inside her chest. In 3 cycles of slavery, no one had ever offered her a choice about anything. Vex had treated her as property to be used. Other aliens saw her as an exotic possession or a mark of status. But this strange human spoke to her as if her opinion mattered. Around the table, the other players watched this exchange with varying degrees of confusion. Galactic society operated on clear hierarchies and ownership structures. The concept of refusing legitimately won property was almost incomprehensible to most species. "Why?" Zara whispered, her voice barely audible above the gambling hall's ambient noise. Marcus considered the question seriously before answering. Because I've spent enough time in this galaxy to understand what real value looks like. Credits and territory can be lost or stolen, but dignity, that's something no one should be able to take from another being. Vex Theron's patience finally shattered. The Saurian lunged across the table with speed that would have been blur to most species, claws extended toward Marcus's throat. But the human had been watching for this reaction, and he moved with a fluidity that seemed to bend physics. Instead of dodging backward like most beings would, Marcus stepped forward into Vex's attack. His left hand caught the crime lord's wrist, while his right delivered a precise strike to a nerve cluster that few non-Saurians even knew existed. Vex dropped like a fallen tree, his nervous system temporarily overloaded by the targeted pressure point attack. Morg was already rising from his seat, all four arms reaching for weapons that security regulations had supposedly prevented from entering the gambling hall. But Marcus was faster, producing a device that emitted a high-frequency sound wave specifically calibrated to disrupt Zephyrian inner ear balance. The warrior crashed sideways into a neighboring table, sending chips and drinks flying in all directions. Queen Zalteth made no aggressive moves, but her compound eyes were analyzing every detail of Marcus's combat techniques. The hive mind's databases contained no records of humans displaying such precise knowledge of alien anatomy and physiology. "Fascinating," she chittered. "Your species continues to exceed expectations." Marcus helped Zara to her feet, noting how she moved with careful grace despite the shock collar around her neck. The device was designed to deliver incapacitating pain if she strayed too far from her owner or attempted to resist commands. "May I?" he asked, indicating the collar. When she nodded, Marcus examined the locking mechanism for several seconds before producing a small tool from yet another pocket. The collar fell away within moments. Its sophisticated locks apparently no match for whatever technique the human employed. "How did you—" Zara began. "Human engineers have a saying," Marcus replied with a slight smile. "Any lock can be opened if you understand the principles behind it well enough." By this time, station security had arrived to investigate the disturbance. The lead officer, a heavily augmented Terran, surveyed the scene with professional dispassion. Unconscious crime lords and weapons violations usually meant paperwork that extended well past the end of his shift. "What happened here?" he demanded. Queen Zalteth answered before anyone else could speak. "A legitimate business transaction conducted according to established gambling protocols. Mr. Chen won fairly, and when the former owner attempted to dispute the results with violence, he defended himself within acceptable parameters. The security officer's enhanced optics recorded everything, the cards still displayed on the table, the sensor logs proving no cheating had occurred, the weapons that Vex and Morg had illegally brought into the establishment. From a legal standpoint, Marcus had committed no violations. The Cathari female was property legally wagered and won, the officer noted. Transfer of ownership appears valid under current regulations. "She's not property anymore," Marcus said firmly. "I'm formally emancipating her under Human Rights Protocol 17. As of this moment, she's a free citizen with all associated protections." This declaration caused murmurs throughout the gambling hall. Human Rights Protocol 17 was a recent addition to galactic law, pushed through by human diplomats despite significant alien resistance. It established that no sentient being could be held as property if they chose freedom, regardless of local customs or existing debt structures. Vex Theron was beginning to regain consciousness, his predatory eyes focusing on Marcus with pure hatred. "This isn't over," he managed to hiss. The human's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Actually, it is. You lost fairly, and now you're threatening a free citizen under galactic protection. I'd recommend cutting your losses." The crime lord struggled to his feet, assisted by newly arrived members of his organization. His reputation had taken severe damage, but direct confrontation with station security would make things worse. "We will meet again, human." "I'm sure we will," Marcus replied calmly. "I'll be ready." As the various parties dispersed and security restored order to the gambling hall, Zara found herself walking beside Marcus toward the station's civilian quarters. She was free for the first time since childhood, but freedom brought its own uncertainties. "What happens now?" she asked. Marcus paused at a viewport showing the star field beyond the station. "Now you decide what you want to do with your life. The galaxy is a big place and you're not bound by anyone else's choices anymore." "What about you? What do you want?" The human was quiet for several moments, watching ships move through the traffic patterns around the station. "I want to show you something that most beings in this galaxy have forgotten. That every sentient life has value that can't be measured in credits or owned by others." Zara studied his profile in the starlight, beginning to understand that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. This strange human had given her something more precious than freedom. He had given her back her dignity, and somewhere in the depths of her consciousness, she felt the first stirrings of something she had thought destroyed long ago: hope. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus and Zara left Station Nexus 7 aboard his modified cargo hauler, the Wandering Star. The ship was nothing impressive by galactic standards, a human-built vessel that most alien species considered crude and unreliable. But Zara had quickly learned that appearances could be deceiving where humans were concerned. The cargo hold had been converted into a surprisingly comfortable living space, with separate quarters that Marcus insisted she could lock from the inside. The gesture spoke volumes about his character, especially compared to the beings who had previously controlled her life. For the first time in cycles, she felt safe enough to sleep without constantly listening for approaching footsteps. Marcus proved to be an excellent traveling companion. He was patient with her questions about galactic geography and politics, sharing knowledge that most beings took for granted. More importantly, he never made assumptions about what she wanted or needed, always asking her preferences before making decisions that affected both of them. Today they were approaching the Outer Rim system, where Marcus claimed the Prometheus cache was located. Zara had begun to wonder if the mining rights he had wagered were actually real, or if the entire gamble had been an elaborate bluff. Not that it mattered. Her freedom was worth more than any amount of rare Earth elements, but her curiosity about Marcus continued to grow with each passing day. "There," he said, pointing to a section of space that looked identical to every other patch of void they had passed through. "Dead ahead. About 2 million kilometers." Zara activated the ship's enhanced sensors, expecting to see the usual asteroid field that marked mining operations. Instead, the display showed something that made her ears twitch in surprise. A massive derelict ship floated among the asteroids, its hull scarred by decades of micro-impacts and radiation exposure. "That's not a mining facility," she observed. Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious features. "No, it's not. The Prometheus cache isn't a place, it's a ship, my grandfather's ship." The derelict vessel was enormous by human standards, though modest compared to the city-sized constructions that some alien civilizations favored. Its design was distinctly Earth origin, with the angular efficiency that characterized early human space engineering. But there was something else about its configuration that seemed familiar to Zara's trained eye. "That's a deep survey vessel," she said suddenly. "I've seen technical schematics in my previous owner's files. They were supposed to be purely exploratory, with minimal mining capabilities." "Officially, yes," Marcus agreed, guiding the Wandering Star toward the derelict's docking ports. "But my grandfather was creative in his interpretations of mission parameters. When they found the largest concentration of rare Earth elements in recorded history, He decided that abandoning such a discovery would be criminally wasteful. As they drew closer, Zara could see that the Prometheus hadn't been abandoned in distress. Its docking systems were still functional, and several cargo bays showed signs of recent modification. Someone had been maintaining this vessel across the decades, keeping it operational despite its apparent isolation. "You've been here before," she realized. "Every few cycles," Marcus confirmed. "Grandfather left detailed instructions in his will. He knew that humanity would eventually need these resources, but he also understood that revealing their location too early would invite exactly the kind of predatory behavior we just escaped from." The docking procedure was completed with surprising smoothness. The Prometheus's automated systems recognized the wandering star's approach codes and guided them into a pressurized bay that showed no signs of the deterioration that space exposure usually caused. When the airlock cycle completed, Zara followed Marcus into the derelict vessel's corridors. Emergency lighting created pools of warm illumination, while life support systems hummed quietly in the background. The ship felt more like a sleeping giant than a dead hulk. "How is this possible?" Zara asked, running her fingers along wall panels that showed no signs of age or damage. "This vessel should have lost power decades ago." Marcus led her deeper into the ship's interior, past laboratories filled with equipment that represented the cutting edge of human technology from a previous generation. "Grandfather was an engineer before he became a navigator. He understood that hiding something valuable required more than just choosing a remote location." They entered what had once been the ship's main cargo hold, and Zara's breath caught in her throat. The vast space was filled with precisely organized containers, each one labeled with contents and quantities. The numbers were staggering, enough rare Earth elements to supply several star systems for generations. But it wasn't the wealth that stopped her in her tracks. It was the garden. Somehow, in the center of the cargo hold, someone had created a living ecosystem. Earth plants grew alongside species from a dozen different worlds, their roots intertwined in soil that seemed to shimmer with subtle energy. The air smelled of growing things and morning rain, completely at odds with the sterile environment she had expected. "Welcome to my grandfather's real legacy," Marcus said softly. "This is impossible," Zara whispered, approaching the garden with the reverence usually reserved for sacred spaces. "These species shouldn't be able to coexist. The atmospheric requirements alone. Grandfather spent 30 years learning how to make impossible things work together," Marcus explained, settling onto a bench that had been carved from what looked like crystallized asteroid material. "He believed that the galaxy's real treasure wasn't rare minerals or advanced technology. It was the diversity of life itself." Zara knelt beside a flowering plant that she recognized from her homeworld. Its violet petals were exactly the same shade as her skin, and its fragrance brought back memories of childhood that she had thought lost forever. How did he know to include Cathari flora? He didn't just collect elements during those exploration missions. He gathered genetic samples from every world they visited, creating a seed bank that represented hundreds of civilizations. This garden is just a small demonstration of what becomes possible when different forms of life are given the chance to grow together. The implications were staggering. Most galactic civilizations viewed other species as competitors for resources, or at best, trading partners to be exploited when convenient. The idea of deliberately preserving and nurturing alien life forms was so foreign to established thinking that few beings would even understand the concept. "Your grandfather was trying to prove something," Zara realized. "That cooperation is more powerful than competition," Marcus confirmed. "That diversity creates strength instead of weakness. That the galaxy doesn't have to be a zero-sum game where one species' success requires another's failure." They spent several hours exploring the Prometheus, and each discovery reinforced the same theme. The ship's computer cores contained databases of cultural knowledge from dozens of civilizations, art, music, literature, philosophical traditions that most beings had never encountered. The medical bay held treatments and cures developed by combining the best insights from multiple species' healing traditions. Most remarkably, the engineering sections showed modifications that incorporated design principles from across the galaxy. Human durability combined with Cathari precision, Saurian power systems enhanced by Zephyrian efficiency, hive mind computational networks adapted for individual consciousness. The result was technology that surpassed what any single species could achieve alone. This is why Vex and the others were so interested in the mining rights, Zara said as understanding dawned. It wasn't just about the rare earth elements. Marcus nodded grimly. Grandfather's work represents something that threatens every established power structure in the galaxy. Crime lords, corporations, even some governments. They all depend on conflict and scarcity to maintain control. The idea that abundance and cooperation are possible challenges everything they've built. Which means they'll come looking for this place eventually. Almost certainly. Grandfather's protective measures won't remain secret forever, especially now that we've filed legitimate mining claims. But that's why he made sure the knowledge would survive him. Marcus led her to the ship's main computer terminal, where he input a complex access code. The display activated, showing a star map that encompassed most of known space. Hundreds of locations were marked with various symbols, each one representing a different type of resource or discovery. This is just one cache among many, he explained. Grandfather and his colleagues created a network of hidden facilities across the outer rim. Some contain raw materials, others hold technological innovations or cultural archives. Each location is designed to support the others, creating a foundation for something entirely new. Zara studied the star map, her engineer's mind beginning to grasp the scope of what she was seeing. You're talking about building a civilization from scratch. Not building, Marcus corrected. Growing, the same way this garden grows, by bringing together different elements and giving them the support they need to flourish together. The concept was both thrilling and terrifying. Zara had spent her entire adult life in a galaxy where power meant the ability to dominate others, where survival required accepting one's place in rigid hierarchies. The possibility that different rules might apply seemed too good to be true. What about the people already in charge? She asked. They won't simply allow their authority to be challenged. Marcus's expression grew more serious. No, they won't. Which is why this has to be done carefully, with the right people making the right choices at the right time. Grandfather spent decades identifying beings who shared his vision, individuals from various species who understood that cooperation was possible. Like you? Like us, he corrected gently. I didn't win you in a card game by accident, Zara. I'd been watching Vex's operations for months, waiting for the right opportunity to extract you safely. Your engineering background and your personal experience with the galaxy's darker side make you exactly the kind of person this project needs. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. You planned the entire thing? Marcus raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. Not the way you're thinking. I couldn't have predicted the specific circumstances or guaranteed the outcome. But I knew that someone with your skills was being wasted in Vex's organization, and I knew that you deserved better than slavery. Everything else was improvisation and luck. Zara felt a complex mix of emotions washing over her. Part of her was angry at being manipulated, even with the best of intentions. But a larger part was amazed that anyone had cared enough about her welfare to take such enormous risks. You gambled everything on the chance that you could help me? I gambled everything on the chance that you might want to help others, Marcus replied honestly. The galaxy is full of beings trapped in situations they never chose. Some are slaves like you were, Others are caught in economic systems that keep them desperate. Still others are locked into cultural roles that prevent them from reaching their potential. But if we could show them that alternatives exist, they might choose something different, Zara finished. Exactly. She walked back to the garden, her thoughts churning as she processed everything she had learned. The plants seemed to whisper in the recycled air, their alien beauty proof that impossible things could indeed flourish when given proper care. "What would you need me to do?" she asked finally. Marcus joined her among the growing things, his relief evident despite his attempt to remain casual. "Help me expand this. Not just the garden, the entire concept. We have resources and knowledge, but we need people with the skills to implement them responsibly. Engineers who understand that technology should serve life rather than replacing it. Teachers who can show others that cooperation is possible. Leaders who measure success by how many beings they lift up rather than how many they can control." "And you think I could be one of those people?" Marcus met her eyes directly, his gaze holding the same steadiness that had impressed her during the card game. "I think you already are. You've survived in a system designed to break you, and you've retained enough compassion to ask what happens to others in similar situations. That combination of strength and empathy is exactly what the galaxy needs more of." Zara felt something warm unfurling in her chest. Not just hope this time, but purpose. For the first time since her family's death, she could envision a future worth working toward. "Where do we start?" she asked. Marcus smiled, and the expression was like sunrise after a long night. "We start by going home. There are people waiting to meet you, and they have ideas that will change everything you think you know about what's possible." As they prepared to leave the Prometheus, Zara took one last look at the impossible garden. The plants swayed gently in the artificial breeze, their roots intertwined despite coming from worlds that had never known each other's existence. If such different forms of life could thrive together here, perhaps the same principle could work on a larger scale. Perhaps the galaxy didn't have to remain the cruel, competitive place that had claimed so many lives. Perhaps, with enough care and courage, something better could grow from the seeds that Marcus's grandfather had planted among the stars. For the first time in her life, Zara believed that tomorrow might be brighter than today. And beside her, Marcus was already planning how to make that belief into reality. 2 years had passed since Zara first set foot in the impossible garden aboard the Prometheus, and the changes in her life continued to amaze her daily. The ramshackle outpost that Marcus had initially called home had grown into something that defied easy categorization. Part research station, part agricultural collective, part diplomatic embassy for species that had never formally recognized each other's existence. New Eden, as the inhabitants had voted to name it, occupied a strategically positioned asteroid in neutral space. What had once been barren rock now housed a thriving community of beings from across the galaxy, all united by the revolutionary idea that cooperation could overcome the limitations that had defined interstellar civilization for millennia. Zara stood in the main observation deck, watching cargo vessels arrive from a dozen different systems. Each ship brought new refugees, new ideas, and new challenges for the growing community to address. Her role as chief engineer had evolved into something closer to systems integration specialist, a job that existed nowhere else in known space because no one else had attempted to create technology that served multiple species simultaneously. "The water recycling systems are running at 96% efficiency," she reported to Marcus, who was reviewing diplomatic correspondence from 3 star systems, where New Eden's influence was beginning to create political complications. "The hive mind modifications to our filtration networks have reduced processing time by 30%, and the Saurian thermal management improvements have eliminated the power fluctuations we were experiencing last month." Marcus looked up from his datapad with the expression of quiet satisfaction that Zara had learned to associate with his proudest moments. Any compatibility issues between the different technical approaches? None that we haven't been able to solve through collaborative engineering sessions. Yesterday, the Zephyrian engineering team and the Cathari system specialists worked together to optimize the atmospheric processors for our expanded hydroponics bays. The results exceeded both species' individual capabilities by a significant margin. The success still amazed Zara sometimes. When Marcus had first described his grandfather's vision, she had understood it intellectually, but struggled to believe that such cooperation was actually possible. The galaxy she had known was defined by competition, exploitation, and zero-sum thinking. The idea that beings from different species could work together toward common goals seemed like naive, wishful thinking, but experience had taught her otherwise. "The weekly council meeting starts in 20 minutes, Marcus reminded her. "Are you ready to present the expansion proposals?" Zara nodded, though she still felt nervous before addressing the community's governing body. The Council of New Eden represented something unique in galactic history, a democratic organization where each individual vote carried equal weight regardless of species, background, or previous social status. Former slaves sat beside former nobles. Predator species collaborated with traditional prey, and decisions were made through consensus rather than domination. The council chamber was a marvel of adaptive architecture, designed to accommodate the physical and cultural needs of beings with vastly different biological requirements. Atmospheric controls maintained optimal breathing conditions for oxygen-breathing species while providing specialized environments for those requiring different gas mixtures. Gravitational fields could be adjusted locally to suit species that had evolved under different planetary conditions. Most importantly, the chamber's acoustics and translation systems ensured that every being could communicate effectively regardless of their native language or sensory modalities. Zara had spent months refining these systems, drawing on engineering principles from throughout the galaxy to create something that truly served everyone equally. As the council session began, Zara marveled at the diversity of the assembled representatives. The Hive Queen, who had played cards against Marcus 2 years ago, now served as the community's chief computational specialist, her collective intelligence helping to solve problems that individual minds struggled to address. Several former members of Vex Theron's criminal organization had become productive citizens, their understanding of galactic power structures proving invaluable for diplomatic and security planning. Even more remarkably, completely alien species that had no previous contact with galactic civilization were beginning to arrive. Marcus's grandfather's network had apparently included exploration records of sentient species that mainstream society had never encountered. These beings brought entirely new perspectives on science, philosophy, and social organization. "The expansion proposals represent our most ambitious undertaking yet," Zara began when Marcus called upon her to address the council. "We're talking about establishing 12 new outposts across the Outer Rim, each one designed to serve as a hub for regional cooperation and development." She activated the chamber's holographic display system, showing detailed plans that had consumed months of collaborative design work. Each proposed outpost was tailored to its specific location and the species that inhabited nearby systems, but all shared common principles of sustainability, inclusivity, and mutual support. "The agricultural stations will use hybrid growing techniques that combine the best approaches from multiple worlds," Zara explained. "We're not just talking about food production. We're creating centers for biological research that could revolutionize how civilizations think about planetary development." The medical outposts were even more ambitious, designed to serve as treatment centers where specialists from different species could share knowledge and techniques. Early experiments at New Eden had already produced remarkable results, with cross-species medical collaboration leading to cures for diseases that had plagued various civilizations for generations. The educational facilities may be the most important aspect of the expansion, Marcus added when Zara yielded the floor to him. We're creating institutions where beings can learn about other species' cultures, technologies, and ways of thinking. The goal isn't just to share information, it's to demonstrate that diversity makes everyone stronger. The discussion that followed exemplified everything that made New Eden special. Representatives from different species shared concerns and suggestions with the kind of respectful attention that most galactic diplomacy never achieved. When disagreements arose, they were addressed through collaborative problem-solving rather than political maneuvering or threats of force. The Saurian representative, a former military officer named Koroth, raised questions about security for the proposed outposts. His species' warrior culture had initially made him skeptical of New Eden's pacifist ideals, but experience had shown him that strength could take many forms beyond simple combat prowess. Several of these locations are in territories claimed by established governments or criminal organizations, Koroth observed. They may view our expansion as territorial encroachment rather than humanitarian outreach. The concern was legitimate. New Eden's growing influence had already attracted attention from beings who saw the community's success as a threat to their own authority. Vex Theron had been quietly building alliances among crime lords who viewed Marcus's project as a dangerous precedent that could inspire their own property to seek freedom. "Which is why we're approaching expansion carefully," replied Celia, a former corporate executive whose species the Valorians had initially joined New Eden as refugees from economic persecution. "Each outpost will be established only with the explicit consent of local populations. We're offering partnership, not conquest." The Hive Queen's compound eyes glittered as she processed multiple probability matrices simultaneously. Analysis indicates 73% likelihood of violent opposition from established power structures within 18 months of expansion initiation. However, same analysis projects 87% probability of overall success if initial resistance is weathered successfully. Such direct discussion of potential conflicts would have been impossible in most galactic forums, where admitting vulnerability was seen as inviting attack. But New Eden had learned that honest assessment of challenges was the first step toward overcoming them. "We're not defenseless," Marcus reminded the assembly. "Military force isn't our preferred solution to problems, but we've developed capabilities that most hostile forces don't expect." This was an understatement that made Zara smile despite the seriousness of the discussion. New Eden's defensive systems represented a fusion of technologies and tactics that no conventional military force was prepared to counter. When you combined human adaptability with Saurian strength, Zephyrian speed, hive mind coordination, and Ketheri precision, the result was formidable by any standard. More importantly, they had allies throughout the galaxy who shared their values even if they couldn't openly support the community's goals. The network that Marcus's grandfather had established included sympathetic individuals embedded within governments, corporations, and military organizations. Information flowed both ways through these connections, providing New Eden with intelligence while demonstrating that alternatives to conventional power structures were possible. The council session continued for several hours, with detailed discussions of resource allocation, technological development priorities, and diplomatic strategies. By the time the meeting concluded, unanimous consent had been achieved for proceeding with the expansion plan, though implementation would be gradual and carefully monitored. As representatives filed out of the chamber, Marcus and Zara found themselves alone among the softly glowing holographic displays. The weight of what they were attempting sometimes felt overwhelming, but moments like these reminded them both why the effort was worthwhile. "Your grandfather would be proud," Zara said quietly. Marcus smiled, the expression holding all the warmth that had first attracted her attention during that fateful card game. "I think he'd be more interested in what comes next. This is just the beginning of what becomes possible when beings stop seeing each other as competitors and start recognizing each other as collaborators." Zara moved closer to him, her violet skin taking on a deeper hue that indicated emotional intensity among her species. Over the past 2 years, her feelings for Marcus had evolved from gratitude through friendship into something deeper and more complex. He had given her freedom, but more than that, he had shown her a way to use that freedom meaningfully. "What do you think comes next?" she asked. Marcus considered the question seriously, as he did most things. "I think we prove that the galaxy doesn't have to be the way it's always been. I think we show everyone, predator and prey, master and slave, conqueror and conquered, that there are better ways to live together among the stars." His hand found hers, and Zara felt the familiar warmth that came from their physical contact. Human and Cathari biology were compatible in ways that both species scientists found fascinating, but the emotional connection between them transcended simple physical attraction. "I love you," she said, using the human phrase because her native language had no direct equivalent for the concept of choosing to bond with someone from outside one's species. "I love you too," Marcus replied, and the words carried all the promise of their shared future. They had discussed formal bonding ceremonies that would honor both human and Cathari traditions, while creating something new that reflected their unique circumstances. Such a union would be unprecedented in galactic history, but that seemed appropriate for beings who had already dedicated their lives to making unprecedented things possible. As they walked through New Eden's corridors toward their shared quarters, Zara reflected on how much her life had changed since that night on Station Nexus 7. She had begun as a prize in someone else's game, but she had become something far more valuable, a partner in building a future worth living in. Behind them, the council chamber's displays continued showing the expansion plans that would soon carry their message to 12 new star systems. Ahead of them lay challenges that would test everything they believed about cooperation, diversity, and the possibility of positive change. But they would face those challenges together, along with hundreds of other beings who had discovered that the galaxy's greatest treasure wasn't rare elements or advanced technology. It was the opportunity to prove that different forms of life could not just coexist, but thrive together among the infinite possibilities of space. In the garden that had started everything, plants from dozens of worlds continued growing in impossible harmony. Their roots intertwined beneath soil that sparkled with the dreams of a grandfather who had believed that tomorrow could be better than today. And throughout New Eden, beings from across the galaxy worked side by side to make that belief into reality. The future was unwritten, but for the first time in galactic history, it was being written by those who had previously been considered prizes, property, or problems. And the story they were telling promised to be more beautiful than anything the galaxy had ever seen before.